there is any project about extending the config trait?
Yeah, no. No project.
Okay, no, just a question about the use of Slim for later.
Yeah. All right. So let's start. So I only have 1 hour this week. We have a proper agenda. First of all, let me just give you an update on what did change across all the branches and why. So it started, as you guys remember, we tried to clean up a little bit the method which resolves the class into a namespace, but as a result, it was a lot of mess, and some of you tried to fix it. And I created legacy branches. So, and because Imans was, he uses it in a project, he sits on develop, which is not a good thing to do, but I suppose some of you do need that. So he was able to jump on legacy. The whole thing worked fine for him, and now he's back on develop, and develop works.
Okay.
So there is one commit in the UI. I'm going to show it to you. Alain merged something, and then he reverted the merge, and this caused a little bit of a mess. So I had to delete the develop branch, and I had to create a new develop branch, and then reconstruct all the pull requests which wanted to merge the old develop into the new develop. So I did a bit of what's called rebase. Yeah, so it's doing interactive rebase. I actually found a really nice application called Fork. It's a Mac application, but it's free, and it helps you to organize Git.
I use Kraken now.
Yeah, Kraken is also quite nice.
Okay.
Right. Also, as a result, I did merge the Francesco's additions to the table columns.
Okay.
But I didn't look into it too much.
Okay. I use in 2 projects, and it's good at now. We will see if someone start to. I made even some example, and
okay, yeah, well, I guess need to just take a look into that, and if we need to feature things. So for example, when we're adding in something new, we need to make sure that users can read about that in some sort of an update or changelog or a readme, and also have some examples. And that's why it's kind of important to have that in documentation. And
yes.
So I'm going to, going back to the ATK. So I'm here sharing the commit. This is the one which fixed the ATK and prepared it for core version number 2. I just wanted you to show, what was the, in general, this is the change, right? So previously, we're adding a view, and this assumes that somehow this view will become ATK UI view. So now we need to explicitly state that. So it's we use this as a prefix.
Okay, but it's a low-level change. I mean, no one use directly columns.
Right, exactly. So you don't need to do it in application unless you use the factory method directly. So if you see only affected factory methods, it doesn't affect add method, because add has no, it doesn't have option to specify namespace. And then there was a change in here in view, right? So this is the body of the add method, right? So add method.
Okay.
And as you see, there's a factory in here as well. And
Perfect.
I added it here. So that means anything you try to add through the view, and if you remember, then adding anything into the application actually adds it into the layout. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it. Yeah, the exception is if you're using the add like this, so with underscore, so as a trait. Then obviously it will not go through this method, and you have to prepare the object if you want to accept proper seeds.
Okay.
And yeah, so there was one in the wizard, there was one in like virtual page. Maybe there are some more, but the test suite was working fine. So I tested all the pages, it looked good, and yeah, I moved on. So this form is accepted. You can add checkbox like this. Also possible. Obviously, you need to use the proper slash, as we discussed.
Yes.
It needs to be slash like this. Yeah. So that's all.
That was the problem when I tried to fix the namespace, and I arrived at with a bunch of if just to see if it works, but. Okay.
So at the end, everything worked correctly, and we are on the develop branch. The problem was that I had to change multiple repositories at the same time, and while kind of one changed and the others didn't, there was a problem. But also, there is another thing, right? So when I created the legacy branch, it's called legacy. I know Gaurav doesn't like the word legacy. Because it kind of implies it's being old branch. But if you use this branch, and if you look at the composer file, then it also has the dependencies of the legacy branch. So I had to create legacy branch across all the repositories, including VSQL. Otherwise, they were conflicting.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the update on what happened. Now, probably we would like to do some more changes, and some of those changes might be in a similar category, so they might cause some interruptions in the development branch. If you have any ideas how you'd like to perform those, tell me. But it is possible that develop will go out of. Will start breaking for some time.
Okay.
No ideas?
But I think we can switch directly to Vutu and see if it works correctly.
I think that most of the other changes shouldn't be that destructive. But you never know. Sometimes it just it just happens.
Okay.
Yes, but if you do have any ideas how to manage branches in such a way, so we could we wouldn't have this responsibility of breaking everyone's project and keep moving forward, then do suggest. But for now, I think it's safer for all of us to understand that development is development. It needs to it needs to move forward. So it might change sometimes, break sometimes. There's also a master branch as well, which is updated frequently, and you can use master, and it should actually work, I think.
On master, we move only the stable versions, and we resolve all the issue like this.
But it probably will include betas as well.
Yeah. But is it possible to use the version branch?
Yes, of course. You can always specify asterisk, and then you use the latest release. And obviously, this puts a little bit of pressure on us releasing things more frequently, but that's absolutely fine. And also, you can specify that you want to use 2.0 version, and it will automatically start using the beta branches, I think. So yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay. Regarding the other things, so I wrote this article, kind of dumped all the ideas, looked at what we achieved so far. That's what happened over the next 2 years. You probably all read this article, but I wanted to just look into some of these points and make sure you all understand what it is, and we can discuss whether we actually need that or not. Right. So this is already done. Namespace resolution mechanism to improve support for the class notation. So that's there. Introduce support for translated traits. Now I had a bit of a feedback here. Probably let's discuss that. So Francesca was working on the pull request. Big thanks for that. And I think I put my comments in the code as well. Yeah, there. So
I don't see this. When you do this?
Jesus.
I don't see this, and I literally said, "Whoa, how? What I do? No one said something."
Yes, it is because I have to push this silly button.
Not a problem. I will see all.
Okay, let's just go over it in this. Oh yeah, the other thing is this over here, right? So my suggestion is that we only focus on version 7.1 of PHP, and we can even drop 7.0.
Yes, just in the history is already dropped the version support.
Yeah, so it's already orange, and we're here. It's gonna die soon.
Yes.
Well, maybe as version 2 needs some time till it's ready anyway, maybe start from 7.2 right away. It's less than half a year where PHP 7.1 will still be supported.
Essentially, right now we have everything. So the legacy branch actually works on 5.6 all the way to 7.3. But as we move into version 2, we can easily drop this, and this. So we're dropping 3 versions. We only remaining versions would be 7.2 and 7.3.
Okay, excellent. That's what I meant.
Yeah, and I think the biggest benefit here is that we can define return types. So when we define a method, it can declare what is the return type. And
I'm laughing because that was one of the points on my list that I'd really like for version 2 because I use them quite a lot. The type hintings, I guess it's called, and it's really a great feature we should use, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, let's see what we iterable.
In 7.4, they will put the properties, typing properties, but they already said that we lost some speed in this, but probably we will. It will change in future version because they. Every time you call a method or call a property in 7.4, it will check the type if it's correct. And this is a slowness, added slow to do the PHP, but it's another way of declaring code and working.
Yeah, this was actually I saw this problem was failing. So someone added void as a return type. It was failing.
Because, yes, it's 7.2. 7.2, I think.
No, that's 7.1. So that is it for saying 7.1. 7.0, you can write void, but it thinks it's a class. So yeah. And so that's another one we probably can use. So we have optional arguments a lot, and we can define the type and also have it immutable. So optional arguments could have type. I don't see anything else, not major. But yeah, I suppose it gives us a little bit more flexibility.
One thing I stumbled across when using these type hints is that it makes total sense to how is it called, declare strict types, because I actually had strict types not enabled on my local environment, while on production environment it was enabled, and it was somewhere I put a question mark incorrectly in these type hints what the function will return, and yeah, it broke on development because it was wrong.
I saw this.
I
saw this in the code as well. So, which PHP version this? Well, it was in PHP Unit 8. So ATK Core now uses PHP Unit 8.
Okay.
Before that was PHP Unit 5. Now it's 8.
Yes.
So it's a big jump, but it's quite similar. So in here we have tests, and there are, if you look at some of them, the only difference is that it extends test case, which is a class within the namespace, rather than having something like a PHP unit _ test case in a global namespace. So it's a little bit of refactoring. Also, if you look inside the SRC here, there is a PHP unit agile test case, which uses the old one. So that's for version 5. And the one for PHP 7, you simply add the number 7 here into the test case, and it works with new PHP unit. So probably can update it as well. There are more checks in PHP unit. It complains when you don't have asserts. So some other tests needed to be cleaned up. But I would say that probably can go. So PHP Unit 8 doesn't like version 7.0, but on 7.1 and 7.2 it works fine.
Okay.
And it also used strict types, so it used this declaration. I don't know if we need this or if we don't need it. What benefit does it add? I'm not familiar with the implication of this.
Must be right in every file to be used in every file. Is something that if you put fix chess fix, it will write it at every file, because it's needed if you want to use it and check every strict type of the code. Is
so what does change really?
If you see there, weekly type check.
Do you get warnings if something is wrong?
Yes,
exactly.
Okay.
And it will not work like Philip said before. I mean, in play something like a compiler for C++, something like this, a static. Something like static control.
Okay.
When something, but not the same.
Okay. Yeah. We can try. I'm not sure. So I don't have any opinion on this, whether we should use or not. If any of you wants to use them, I don't mind. I guess we're not using them then.
We will see if there is a test case much more interesting to check it and see if what will happen if you use it, if you not use.
Right. So back to translators, right? So we discussed this. Now about the translators. So this is a new trait, translator trait. And the idea is that if you apply this to your class will have a method for 2 underscores, and then you literally can call it every time. I asked this, why not simply call this API? But we have to understand that API is not always defined. Sometimes you don't have API, and in this case, you have to check if the API is there, and if there, then you call. Otherwise, you don't call. With this function, you just always call, and it will automatically verify if API is there. My only suggestion here was that there are too much code in here. We can probably move this out because we have to support the situation where there is no translation at all. Maybe the dependency is not installed. Okay. So yes, what do you think about that? Now, if we move this into the API, so the only job of this method would be to check if API has the method for translating, and we would call that.
But as I said today to Lil, the other user, Polish user, we'll lose some possible implementation of it. I mean, if we have only, there, I try to make a single translation, a plural translation, and possible argument of translation, and printf at the end, as you see.
Yeah.
I think this part, if you define a translator that is a translator null, I mean a translator that acts like a translator if is not set a translator in the app, and make us not check if exists a translator or not. I mean, if it's not a translator, okay, put a translator null object that if it call act as a translator, but don't look at translation, and return every time the string that you send. I don't know if you understand me.
Well, as I said, my thoughts are that we should declare the format for those strings and how it's used. For example, all the classes will use two things. First, use translate trait. Secondly, this two underscores, and then essentially we add this into so do something like this, and as a second parameter you add like milk into bowl. That's the format, right? And I think that what the trade should do, the only thing trade should do is check for a B and fall back to sprintf. Okay. So I think it shouldn't do anything else. So that the code here for plural cases and everything else, which can be subjective, will go inside actual translator, which might be outside of ATK.
Yes, as I define the interface to be used in objects translator. I mean, my idea is to add, because you speak about possible add-on, possible module. How can I define a translator specific from an object and its child that will fall back to the application that is parent to this object if there is no translation for what I try to translate. I don't know if you understand. I can explain correctly.
Well, let's look at a different example. So we have. I think here in the debug trade, right? So in the debug trade, very similar. We have so it adds method like critical or error, so you can call error inside the method, and it calls log, and the log is the method defined here. And here's what it does. Yeah, so you log a message and the context. So that's what you need to pass here. And it says, if we have an app, and the app has a logger, and the logger is instance of logger interface, which is a standard PSR interface, we simply let it handle the whole thing. Otherwise, we will simply output the message.
Okay. You said we don't use the translate directly in the. I understand. I understand now. Yes. I understand now.
So it needs to be very consistent with this.
Okay. I like the idea. Okay.
All right. The rest. Okay. So let's say I published my review. And then my other question was regarding the translator itself. You have a trait for translator. But my question is there a standard in PHP or other any translators already, which maybe we can use? Very similar to how I use the logger interface. So I don't need to do anything. It just plugs into the ecosystem of loggers. So if possible, we would like to be compatible with the standard instead of coming up with our own trait. I also don't like final. I don't like final class.
No, I like it. I mean, if I make a translator interface and I create something that you can interface with the implementation of that interface, we have internal in ATK a translator that is working with the ATK system, and only with this, and you don't need to specify other things in our implementation of the translator. I mean in this way, because if I give you an interface to interface your class, why you extend mine and move that and use it in another way? I think that must be used. I think more about SAST or other things that can be added to ATK and must use translation, and we don't need that. We need something that must be solid, because translation is a little bit crazy sometimes.
You see, my issue was that it happened to me a few times when I used third-party library, and it's used 99% of what I want. But there is just one small thing I need to change, so I want to extend the class, override the method, but the dumb thing is declared as final. And I'm like, shit. So now I have to re-implement the whole add-on, or look for an alternative add-on, or just go and copy-paste the class into my namespace. It's very messy, right? So in general, I don't like final. Because you're assuming your code is perfect. No one needs to improve or override it. But in reality,
no, I mean that using config in there and can be used for other things in add-on can be critical to be extended and used on other project, and can kill the other project or can make some trouble. it's not a problem. I can remove it, but for a delicate question like translate, I think that must be used. Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
It's just one of the core things in ATK. So we can change the kind of this rule, but that means it should apply to all of ATK.
Okay.
Okay, good. Right. And then look for some PSR about translate. Okay.
But sorry, one second. If we use you mean only to check if there is already an interface for translation and check against it and develop a translator class for ATK?
Yeah. So there was, I know you were showing there was a get text implementation of PHP, but maybe there is something that kind of feels the need of this translator. So instead of using our own, we could use the standard that all those libraries support.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there is. Maybe there is no PSR, but maybe there is. So just check. If no,
okay,
fine, we can use it on.
Okay.
All right, so that's on translated rate. Any other comments? Any more suggestions? I guess no. All right, so we're going back to the plan then. Translators. The refactor of container trait. Good. So as I mentioned before, I said that in some circumstances we want to have something like add field, get field, has field, and then you have add element, get element, has element, and then you have add column, has column, get column, and so on and so on. So in a way, you have like a
hello.
Hello. So multiple methods which are consistent, but they work with different sub-entities. You can do add relations, have relation, delete relations, and so on. So the proposal was to, instead of modifying the current container trait, make a copy of that. And look at that. Cool. Okay, so and instead of using the elements like this, so we remove the elements. This also has no meaning anymore. Oh, actually, no. Yes. So there's no element. And then whenever we using the add method, you need to pass extra parameter, which is a reference to the array containing the elements. And that's it. So the methods will be different again. So you would have add, remove. You would have remove element, add element, and get element, and you simply will execute them through a wrapper inside a class. So not only you add a trait, but you also have to create wrappers. So the normal get element would need to pass short name and the reference to the array, which for get element it would be elements, for fields it would be fields, and so on and so on. And as I'm suggesting that, no, this would be a separate container trait. So we can call it container trait 2, or it could be multi-container trait. And we can have it applied to a class at the same time as the existing container trait. And we can slowly migrate from the old one to the new one. So that, for example, the actions will no longer be in elements, but they will be in an actions array. And to be honest, for user it doesn't change anything. Nothing changed.
Is this more trait file? You mean for what would differentiate the element from the in terms of wrapper?
So at the moment, container trait it adds a method like add, and then method like remove element, right? So the idea is that to create a new trade, which will have probably a private methods. Who's that? Oh, look, it's Goro.
Hi everyone. Sorry for late.
It's okay.
Hello.
Someone came with an echo. Let's mute you.
Okay, let me. Right, actually, I'm on phone. I'm on Hangout on mobile. I'm not on PC. Let me
Okay.
mute.
All right. So what do you guys think about the new trade?
Yeah, like it makes sense.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I don't think it's going to be a major change. Will be a PR. Should we call it multi-container trade?
It says more about what it does than container trade 2.
So it allows you to have multiple containers within the object.
Yeah, exactly. And multi-container trade, from the name you can guess way better what it does than just the name container trade 2. So I prefer multi-container trade.
Okay.
Or multiple container trade.
What about containers with the plural?
Containers trade, yeah.
Well, the one we have now called container trade. Yeah. Okay, fine. It's not that important. Okay. No. Moving on. So user actions. Okay, we kind of have them implemented, but there is no documentation, and specifically there is no tutorial. Actually, now what I did, I went to. So if you go to ATK UI, and we actually never go here, but if you do go here and look at some of the screenshots, they're really scary. They're very old. Okay, this is out of date. There is a tutorial here, like a video you can watch, which has a ATK version 0.4. So, yeah, perhaps some of the content here needs to be removed. And cleaned up. And yeah, I think user action is a big thing. It's a kind of the feature for the version number 2, so it needs to be prominent. So the user starts, I'm refactoring ATK data documentation. There is a pull request, so I'll probably will place a user action somewhere high and make a lot of focus on that. So that's how you define user actions. That's how you use them, and that's how it's recognized by the UI widgets. Okay, let's move on. To add user executors. User action executors supports for executors in grid, CRUD, and card components. So I did grid, and I did single record ones, but I didn't do the one which have no records. Alain, did you add anything to grid in that pull request?
To grid, no.
Okay.
You mean in the card?
Yeah, so you did card, right?
Yeah.
The card is there, which is great. And but we haven't checked how the card works with MasterCard as well, because the MasterCard should work with the new cards now. There was a pull request for cards, I think, which was merged. So it's not inside the release yet. But just to give you an idea, you saw that in the last week. Alain was demonstrating that, some of these things. I sent some suggestions to Alain. He implemented them in here, I think. So that's in develop now. If you can give it a check, see know how it works. If you manage to define any actions, and then the other one is there is a ATK login. So there's a pull request in here, which I think I showed you as well, but I added a little bit more to here, so that there are more actions.
Yeah, basically the change for card was now we dumped the old card class, right? We're using the new one, the card class for the new cards, and then we had section. You can add multiple section with multiple model, and display different field within each model. And we add action. That's basically the change since last week.
Yeah. Yeah. So idea is that if you use card with a model, then you just get some basic output. But like with the form, you can also play with the layouts. You can customize and make it look nicer. But that's your custom work with the UI. So by default, it's pretty raw, but you can improve that. Okay. So that's on the executors. So that's done already, and we also have card implementation here. Refactor documentation layout, that's work in progress. New pattern in editing multi-record data. So I talked about this with you previously. So if we need to work to modify multiple records, we copy them inside array persistence. We work with them there, and then we save by copying everything back. So that involves deep copying stuff out and then deep copying it back in. But there are no tests at the moment that actually use that. There are no tutorials, and I'm suspecting that we might have some problems with IDs when we copy stuff back. So it's not fully working. We need to have this ability to replace things. Right. So yeah, I'm not sure how to do that, but probably would be good. Efficiently release related record form layouts. That's what Alain has done with the invoice lines. But again, there are no documentation, no samples. This needs to be when we have the release of 2.0, it needs to be highlighted, because that's the biggest thing inside the UI. So that we can do that now. ATK data, move lots of code from field into field type classes.
At what point is this?
So now, for the version 2. That's for the version 2.
Okay.
The question is who's going to do that, but I think we should do it now, because once the version 2.0 is announced and released and people consider it stable, it will be bad if we break things. But with this, we can I'll look at the list of standard types in ATK data, and we can say, okay, we need 5 more for 5 new types. We need UUID as a standard type, and it needs to be supported throughout ATK UI. But later we won't be able to do that anymore.
Yes. And we start to make the new type with the measures and geolocation.
Yeah, exactly.
Double types, and then we see.
Okay. One way to do that is I simply go and remove all types from ATK data, and then you guys start complaining, where is my string, where is my password, and you go and add it back.
And Goro kill us.
Yeah, Goro.
Well, I'm using the production system on a very big project.
Yeah. Well, Gora, we fixed the development for you, so.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really, thanks a lot.
No.
You saved me by when developers would my developers would have killed me. I pushed them to ATK. So
Yeah, you
thanks a
see,
lot.
Gora, you were not here, but we discussed about ideas how to avoid stuff like that in the future, and there were no ideas. So
I know. That's why I'm really following you guys here.
yes, right. Okay, so coming back here, so ATK schema. This is something we do use, and the purpose of this is Gora would remember. So in the past we had ability to define model, and if database doesn't correspond to the model definition, then it will change the structure of the database. ATK schema is. I actually can show you ATK schema how like in action. So if
it was dynamic controller auto creator.
Yeah, so if you go ATK login and look at the demo, for example, at the index, there is run migration wizard, which links to wizard. If you look at how wizard is working, it's essentially just migrator console over here. Okay, so we're adding that, and then we tell console that we need to migrate this model. And you can add as many models if you want. You can add all your models here, for example, and it will go over them and will make sure that they have appropriate database schema. And if any fields are missing, it will add those fields. And I'm not sure if it's going to delete fields, but
No.
I think it doesn't. But it could be an option, right? So you can select console, never delete field, or delete fields. But it does look inside the models, and it will simply create the schema. And to be honest, no, I had this. I worked with other migrators. There's one called Hinks, I think, and it's such crap. It's you have to spend so much time on writing your transitions inside the table, and it's very messy because you don't want to do them. I gave up many times, and then I came back because we agreed to use that, and then I gave up again. I think with this, the whole thing can just work much easier. So you just have the wizard, it will read your models, and it will create all the models as required. The other thing is that because we have model and we have field types, which now are more intelligent, we can set a standard that every field type is responsible for actually creating itself inside the database, and it also must support multiple databases. Yeah, so if, for example, Goro creates a new field for geolocation, well, it's better if it knows how to create itself in PostgreSQL. So that would be the idea. Yeah, so we have the migrator, but migrator relies on the field to find out how declare the definition inside SQL, and maybe not only SQL. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of schema, and obviously this needs to be tested and documented. Okay, inside the API we need user actions as well, so some sort of ability to trigger. Right now, I don't know was like a good standard, because I think for the REST APIs you have those 4 actions like adding, deleting, listing. There are no actions for triggering. No standard for triggering action. So you need a new endpoint, and then you post data to it, I suppose. I think post is a good way. So we do need to have some support to do it automatically. Also, by the way, I didn't mention anything about that. In terms of naming methods, all our methods in ATK are called like this. They don't use underscores at all. Use capital letters. However, when we use user action, it makes much more sense to use underscores, because that translates into a readable text much better. So in this pull request, if you look at the way how user actions are defined, they are all defined with underscores. Like generate random password. What do you think about that? Okay. You fine with that? So that means, you know, if we implement any user actions which are added through this, they would have to use underscores. No objections?
I think not.
Okay.
No, it's more readable, obviously.
Yeah, because now if you look at the standards for PHP, they say, okay, you need to use the caps, capital letters. This is a good style. But then, you know, we do use it inside the framework. It's just, you know, we have a special reason for using the underscores. And also it's consistent with fields.
Of adding action and something, it's better to have a method like this. I think yes.
Okay. All right. Next. So in here, add translation. So that what that means is, you know, after we have the mechanism for creating translations, we need some sort of files which will translate all the strings inside ATK data and UI. For the Vue.js, we want to use it in where we can. So if there is a search window inside the grid which doesn't use it right now, then why not use it there? And then Imans has been doing some of this. So if he finds a class which uses underscore, then use the backslash instead. And we have an old backward compatibility code which has been there for years. We should finally get rid of that. So that's the plan. It's not a lot. Most of them are kind of, you know, pretty simple. And there are no major big features. So mostly like, you know, refactors, you know, anything that can break stuff, better to do it now than to do it later. So that's kind of the plan for 2.0. Did you want to add anything? Sorry, Gaurav?
I am more interested in the section coming below.
Section below.
We'll put you behind.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, Gaurav, how many tests do you have inside your app?
Well, a lot, because we are having a game engine which do some financial calculation. We are having hundreds of lines of calculations which do on data side. Most of the on UI we don't have some tests, but we are building some. Right. I'm just getting trained a few more developers into ATK so they can start jumping to creating test cases. Right now they don't know ATK.
So, you know, for example, you know, if you look at the core, we have coverage of 99% for ATK core. And then...
yeah, sounds exciting.
Data has a really good coverage as well, 86. UI has about 60. But it, you know, it improved a lot over you know, some time now. And Alain has contributed a lot of Selenium tests, which is, you know, thanks very much. These tests are very good, and they improve coverage as well. So, but you know, there are still some cases, especially when, for example, you use like hack around, and you know, we can't have tests for that, so it's not covered.
Are we having some dependencies in development composer? Because Selenium we do.
In UI, you mean?
In UI, obviously, in UI, because we cannot Ajax cannot be tested by something unit test or feature test. It has to be behavioral test or UAT. Selenium
We do,
testing
yeah. We
test.
have a proper Selenium driver test.
Okay.
So it's it's done quite well. Philip, I think, yeah, Philip has done the same for his app. Okay. So yes, I mean it's quite difficult for me to know if the change will break the apps or not. But if you are concerned about the stability of different use cases, then adding tests is best thing you can do, which verify that the way you're using framework at the moment is not going to change.
Raman,
Yes.
for UI, right? I think you spoke with Fomantic guy. So, in terms of support for Fomantic, what do you think it's going to look like?
You mean the next version of Fomantic?
Yeah.
I don't think they will. I mean, their approach is to redevelop everything from scratch, so they're starting from zero.
Okay.
It's not what we're doing with our version 2. We're not, rebuilding everything. We're just trying, to change something, minimize the backward compatibility issues, but at the same time, we want to kind of clear the way and so we can move forward.
So we'll stick to that version.
Yeah. We have to stick to the existing versions simply because they have nothing at the moment. But slowly we can refactor our widgets to use Vue.js instead of jQuery where possible. Yeah, I guess we can do that.
Yeah, I think jQuery was still be needed, but yeah, we could use more Vue.js components.
Mm-hmm. My suggestion here is like jQuery is more adaptable. This is a niche kind of technology which a person has to learn to use ATK, not just PHP, because jQuery is like more adaptive, and if we create every component around Vue.js is it's a requirement for the learning curve of ATK. And know if it's good or not.
So Alain, question for you: If we have, for example, components for Vue.js, and we have things like form submission, in the past we had a JavaScript method which allowed us to reload a single field of the form. Yeah, for example, you change the dropdown, and depending on that, it will reload a part of the form, and that was quite good. I don't know if we have it right now. If we have a form on a Vue.js component, will we be able to use that? And is it still compatible with the way how we bind events in ATK? So, for example, I want to say, when this field change, it should reload the other field. So, will it work with the Vue.js?
Yeah, it should. It should still work. Yeah.
But will it require jQuery UI to do the binding? Because right now the PHP like GS chains, they output itself in jQuery.
Well, you could do both, right? You could use regular JavaScript, or you could use jQuery binding. But
also, by the way, I heard that there is a version of jQuery which removes all the DOM manipulation. And like very lightweight version, so perhaps that's what we should use.
I didn't look into that, so I'm not sure about that.
Because we never do the manipulation. Like we rarely do manipulation but we quite often we trigger the events. We do like searching for an element and then triggering the action on that element.
Yeah. But in my plugin, I do use some manipulation.
Yes.
in some plugin.
Yeah, so that kind of, it needs to keep working.
Yeah.
It doesn't require all of the jQuery. If there is a lightweight version of jQuery, we can use that, but I think we still need something.
But even, yeah, I mean, if the lightweight depends, because some of the plugin, like, the form, the conditional form plugin, or, other plugin might use DOM manipulation. Like the ATK model, the create model.
And then we can remove that, okay? If someone used the DOM manipulation, we can refactor it into Vue.js. And over time we can say that, okay, we do use jQuery, but it's only for event handling.
Okay. Yeah.
So again, it's going forward. Yeah, so that's more like long-term goals.
So it will be like more Vue.js backed with P framework set. ATK can be set like that.
So Vue.js implements the component, so the component works with server callbacks directly. And for example, let's say you have a list of checkboxes, and you select checkboxes on the left side. It then triggers a callback. When you do that, it sends which IDs have been checked, and underlying technology is Vue.js. But if you want to create interaction between two components, you need some sort of events between, and this can be not Vue.js but something else.
Well, it still can be done, yeah.
Okay, this is a great proposal, but at the same time, we must be sure that anyone who doesn't know Vue.js, it shouldn't be let's say someone doesn't know Vue.js and he can't create component ATK because he doesn't know Vue.js. This is something not good in my sense.
Yeah.
If I know PHP,
Go developers
CSS, Sorry, come again?
No, I mean, it's another thing for you to teach your developers. They have to learn Vue.js now as well. Wow, no.
They'll definitely.
Okay. We tried from wrapper in PHP, right? So Vue. So.
But the last implementation of a lane are really good because they have methods specific for that component. I mean, you don't have to grab in the code and see what can I do. There are literally a method specific for that component. I really like the last component you do.
Yeah, so for example, okay, if we look at the source at the moment in ATK, we have a lot of classes which start with GS. And GS notify, GS model, and toast search and so on. But like GS search, it's is it for a specific view? And to give you example, we have like if you look at the form, there is a method called the function success, right? Call this form to generate success message, and it returns JavaScript action. And so, to be honest, you don't care if it returns a code which is jQuery or if it's Vue.js code, as long as it does something like what you want. It's good. And for the form was the first one when we tried those functions, success and error. And later on, we decided that if we do add these methods, they will be called GS success and GS error, simply to indicate that it will return a JavaScript. Alain, do you have a good example to show for this? I think
you mean for
like model had GS hide or hide? Which view had the JavaScript callback?
You mean in PHP?
Yeah, like PHP methods as a wrapper for callbacks.
Well, there's a lot. Like if you look at the GS view, right?
Let me look at the model first. Yeah. Maybe not here. GS view.
Like you mean?
No, I mean, for example, let's say you have tabs, right? Tabs. This is a standard PHP class, and you can add it, and it displays tabs. You can call add tab, and when rendering, it will have an extra tab. How do you activate a tab? Right. So how? If you want, so for example, let's say you have a button.
Yeah, in view rendering, like
yeah. So you click on the button, it needs to activate the tab. One approach is to take the this class called GS and then call some mysterious method which will open a new tab.
Look at the drop down, for example. The drop down.
Yes. Yes.
This one?
Yeah. Again, in render view. Yeah. That what you mean?
Yeah. So if it's inside a component, no one will care. But if Gaurav has to write something like this, that means he needs the knowledge of JavaScript to understand what drop down is.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was saying is, it's a much better if, for example, you have tabs, and inside here. Oh, sorry. What is this? Okay, let's say we add a new method at the back, which is called public function JS select tab, and then tab, like number of the tab, or maybe a view corresponding to the tab, and in here, does some JS, and then returns, right? So the idea is it does this. So that after that you can have a button on click, tabs, GS select tab 2, and if you write this code, you don't care if it's a jQuery or if it's something else. It's just going to work. And right now you need to do GS and then call something like tabs select tab 2, but this is requires knowledge of the JavaScript, or of the underlying implementation of the tabs widget.
Yes, you need to go to semantic and see what are the methods to be called.
Also, there is no type hinting, but if we could make it like this is really helpful. So that's you know what the argument is going to be, and you can pass over here. So I think it's much better way.
Yes, and after that we will can build some Vue.js or semantic UI implementation underneath.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just idea for that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to discuss was the change to the CRUD, because of the actions. Actually, it's grid. No, it's CRUD. Sorry, CRUD. Okay, and as you know, there is first of all, there are methods like this: page create, page update. There is also can create, can update, and can delete arguments, which you can set true or false. Will enable or disable certain actions. deleting, and then inside. So when we have code like this, the actions, because we have actions now, it is quite easy. So we're saying, okay, we want to have like all single record actions, and now for every of those, we just want to add user action, which will implement it like a button, add a new button there. And my question I wanted to discuss: do you guys think that these become redundant? Because we can kind of think about create, update, and delete as the actions which are present in all the models.
Well, I couldn't get you exactly what you're saying.
But you need to add these actions to every model. Right?
Right now our model has like ability. You can add a new record. You can update the record. You can delete record. But we're adding support for additional actions. So, for example, you can archive a record. Now, what I'm saying is the way how you enable or disable those standard actions, should that be much different from the way how you enable and disable archive action? Because I see like consistency here. Like so, the way how CRUD operates with create, update, and delete, it's very consistent to how it deals with those custom actions.
Can these properties be a wrapper properties and add and internally added as an action? But if it's not set like can create, the action will not get added. It will be like that also. Just in property with set.
No, what I'm saying, if we have can create, can update, and can delete, someone might ask, why don't you have can archive as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we have special treatment for those three, why don't we have special treatment for other actions?
So it can be an array can, and that in the array of can we can put whatever you want to pass action, edit, delete, or archive as true or false.
Can be read like it is a CRUD, and we must have something to create, update, read, and delete. And that will be the standard action that must have.
So this is what we had in the past.
Actions. It's a CRUD.
Yeah, so we had operations, so it was array. As you say, Gaurav, you have like those actions.
Yeah.
But it was quite difficult to inject that because, it just, that's how you would use it, right? So if you can do the update, then this could. So it was like this, but it was changed.
So, but I agree with Francis. If it's a CRUD, so CRUD itself says create, retrieve, and delete. So these are the basic actions. If and you are user in an action, that's separate issue. How you want to handle it. Can create and can delete should be the part of the CRUD. If every action is considered like that, it's not CRUD. It's something else.
Why can't CRUD have more than the 4 basic actions?
But in that case, at least create, update, and delete should be specifically separated thing, user actions, because it's a CRUD. At least these are the minimum actions which has to be there. We can't use archive, can be there and cannot be there, but edit will always be there. Whether you want to activate them because of the AC, that's another story. What I have also done.
Okay. Okay. The other question: when we do set model for a view, so usually passing our pattern is that we pass the first argument, which is the model itself, and then we have a definition of the field. So tells which fields we want to have. My proposal is that we add another argument here, where you specify which actions. Again, you can leave it blank. It will have exactly the same way as if you omit the fields. But you can specify which actions you'd like user to perform using the view. And I think that is implemented inside the card now. So I should be able to show you the card.
No, it's
not here.
No, it's a separate model. Yeah, separate method.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, so that would mean that in here we have fields, and then we also specify actions, and with those actions, just passing the array, you saw how the actions are declared. So they all use underscores and stuff. You just pass the array of all the actions that you want user to see as buttons on the card.
I think it's okay because we set the model, the field, the actions. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but looks okay.
Okay, good. Now it's Francesco. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's see. I see that in Pimple, in place of PHP direct injection library, is more easy to be understandable. I go in presentation if I see how to do it. How to do it, the presentation here. Altre opzioni. Wait. Modifica layout. Yeah. Wait. I will see. How to present. How to present?
There are 3 dots. Yeah.
At the bottom, on the right side, at the bottom.
Is a big button. Presenta ora. Okay.
Yeah.
One.
Sometimes.
Una finestra. Wait. My finestra. Oh, I think this is okay. Let me see if you see. If we don't explode, as you see, the explosion incoming. Explosion incoming. Oh, it stops. It starts. Okay. Okay. You see something?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see Pimple here?
Yes.
Okay. In Pimple, that is much simpler than PHP DI. They make a container out of the application, and in the container that they define something like an array. In this array, they define function for something like a singleton object, but is not a singleton, is an instance of the object that is linked to the container that it will be passed to the application. And that can be a string, an int, or an instance like this, or a factory. I mean, every time I call this container session, I will get a new instance of the object that is defined in that container. Why I say this? Because let's speak about the logger interface. If I define in the container array a key with the namespace name, literally PSR logger interface, I can create an object that is implementing this logger. And in the app, I can call the config container and get this object like it was a singleton, because all the app call that instance. And the same I can do for the factory method. We have already the config trait that can do this, and we must define two interface to identify the instance and the factory. And doing this, we can define directly in config, let's say translation or logger interface. I mean, the object that implement translate interface, the object that translate implement logger interface, and call it from there and inject in the application. Why I should do it? Because I don't want in the application, I don't want to extend the application. I want to define a config and try to call the config, define the config container and call that config from container from in the application to get this object and use it directly. If I want to switch this object to another implementation, I can go in the container config and change it in one point, like we do with the view and buttons with the factory trait and the container trait. I mean, it's not a big change.
So,
but
Francesco, can I just confirm something? So this looks like, very similar to the seed mechanism in ATK, but
yes,
the implementation is not by specifying an array, but instead you specify a callback.
Yes, because a callback to define an instance, and if you need a factory,
and then for example, let's say you have a model, and inside the model you say add field, and add field needs to create a new object for the field. So it can be passed in this container, and container will be configured which field type represents should have which callback to create a new instance of the field.
Yes, but wait, I mean, you can do it like this. I mean, I call the container config where there is a Boolean field. Let's say like this, I call Boolean field and I get the Boolean field like it was defined. But I think in ATK, this is not needed. The only need probably is for extra component out of ATK to be not defined in the application or injected every time you call the application, and have only one config. Let's say something like I have a RESTful API and the application, but I want the logger, the same logger, to be used in the same in both the implementation of these two frameworks that work independently. And to do that, I can literally make an include, or much more elegant, make a config trait with these two changes and define a config in a big folder with definition of all the config that I need of other objects. I try to share another type of. Let's see if this is probably. Wait, it's much easy like this. Nemesis, but here. I don't know if you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, I don't see. It's over. Practically is like this. If it's not. Oh. Okay. Let's see. And okay. I define some definition of the object that I have to use and call a class new instance that can be recognized in the config, and I define the logger here, and I return the logger that will substitute this instance the first time it will be called. Let's see if yes, something like this. I read the config, I get the logger interface. This is another object, but I get the logger interface, and here I have the logger implementation that I choose that implement the logger interface. And I don't have a bunch of code, but I have only a little code out of the application with all the implementation. And if I want to change something, is not all in the app. And for doing this, I define 1, 2, 3, definers. This is the definers. And in the application, wait 2 seconds. Whoa. I don't remember where I put it. Wait. Because easier, obviously. And I use practically the config, the config trait with only just this line of code in plus, because the factory, every time I call an instance of factory, I will get a new object. And every time I call a new key instance, interface instance, I will get the element, if the element is not present. But it was like a test this over the Swole library, and I appreciate so much this, because if I have to do something much more complicated like this, or I have to do something like the requests. This is I try to exclude from the definition of the app the configuration of objects that have nothing to do with the application. And after some time that I try to figure out what is the best option, I see the implementation in Slim that is something really near this that I do. I don't know if is this something that can be interesting.
Can you show the next file, nemesis.php?
Nemesis.php. Yeah. Okay.
Looks a little bit more interesting. So
here I define the whole server of the Swole, define the hot path reloads. There are more things to, but this is, out of this and this is a standard config trait, where I get this file and I read it.
Okay, so here's my question, right? So this returns some sort of an array, and well, we don't have any configuration support in ATK right now, but the one we had in the past, it was relying on reading the array from the file called config.php. So in a way, in the config.php, you can say like logger equals and then include logger.php. So it will execute logger.php, it will take the return value, will assign it into this array, and then all this array is available through the application. And there is also a callback. So the callback can be used to create instances of something. But what you have, like everything else here, it's a bit confusing, but I don't understand what kind of benefit does it give you.
No, it's only what they say is only for practically leave the application in the here. I mean, you have not to extend the application. You can literally define this external.
So it's for the case, for example, if you don't use the ATK as a framework, but instead you use application like a blog engine, which is written in ATK, and then you just install it through dependency, and you want to write as little code as possible and to make it work.
I not understand the last part. Sorry. Try to.
Just trying to understand the use case. And so is it for the situation where you want to create and use a stock application, something like a blog engine, like WordPress? Okay, you create your own WordPress in ATK, so you install it through Composer, but you want to have minimum number of files to configure it. And you definitely don't want to extend any of the class from that application, because you don't want to build the application, you want to use the application. Is that the use case?
Literally, let's say like this. If I have a logger now in the app, okay, I have a logger, I want to add the log to the app, I need to call the app or extend the app and add the log, correct?
In ATK, yes, at the moment, that's right.
But if you do like this, in place of define the logger that are a bunch of code, you can call the config that it was that has already read all the files in a directory, okay, and can call directly get config container, let's something like this. Config container, get config logger class, and you get the logger.
The problem is that ATK is not an application; it's a framework, and you cannot do anything without creating your own classes or extending something. But if you use an application, maybe some other project which relies on ATK, and you want to kind of configure it, then this all makes sense. Okay, so the application lives in the namespace. You don't want to touch it. You just it simply sits inside the vendor, as you said, and all you do is like inject a little bit of code through the configuration file that can configure various parts of the application, like loggers maybe like the servers it runs. It all makes sense. I like the way how it's done, but it looks more appropriate for the application and not the framework.
Okay, I understand. Conceptual, my more conceptual of use, let's say like this, or application of the framework. And you don't think that can be useful to give some skeleton to the users?
If they so in my case, I usually build apps which are narrowly focused at a single client. So he will have a server configuration. The whole thing is pretty much predefined. So he knows what would be the name of the log on the server locally. So you just need to kind of change things a little bit, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference I see here with what you're showing is the format, how you define your config. So it's not in a single file, but multiple files. Also, having the callback inside the config is kind of nice, I think. Nice, but because ATK or the add-ons are currently do not support any kind of configuration, which actually, I wanted to maybe ask all of you. In ATK, so as we move into ATK UI version 2, do we need config support? Do we need built-in config for the app? I don't think so, but maybe
this is ATK, the config trait.
Yeah, but how much is it used? Is it used?
Only to read the config in this moment and store it in config property of the config trait.
So, okay, here's a question. Let's say I'm developing an add-on for ATK. Let's say it's the login add-on. And how much, can it rely on config trait, and to what degree? So how much can it rely on config?
I understand. You mean to do this, you have to pass even the config, where the config for that override the default config of the login to instantiate. I understand.
So I know you have a trait there, but the question is, the application of ATK, does it actually use the config trait?
In this moment, no. I think
but for the version 2, maybe it should.
But when you use it in an application, if you are used to use config files or a bootstrap, probably you will have you will be much easy to use it. Probably many of us when they see the config trait start to use it because it's useful.
Yes, but you have to explicitly use it inside your own app. It's not used on the level of framework. And if there is an add-on, it cannot rely that the application will definitely use the config trait.
But when we add the add-on can look in the master app or the app, if there is a config for him.
Okay.
No.
I'm saying this is good, but my question is this inside the framework right now?
No, it's not in the framework, but in the framework there is no add-on in the moment.
My next question is, do we want that in version 2 of ATK? Because I can add it as an extra point. So it could be one new addition to ATK. So ATK 2 comes out, and we say now it supports global config. So all the add-ons should rely on this app getConfig method to read their configuration, because this is where the user can override it.
can be interesting because we need even the translations and the other that need that. If we have a common configuration or something like this, we can have some init points or some init configuration that all we rely on. I mean, when you do the init method, when you call the init method, you can get from the app that is already added all the config that you need. I mean, something like the base directory of the application in case of you need. And can be interesting, I don't know.
Definitely, yeah, I would appreciate, because last week I told you that it would be nice if there would be a global mechanism for how add-ons can rely on so get their configuration from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like when you say get config and then you use the class. That's really awesome, because that's something which is unique for the add-on. I think that's nice.
I think Gorav wants to say something, but it's not able to.
So he's not showing as muted anymore. Try Gorav. I don't know. It says when I
wait. I look at.
I don't know how to because he is not muted anymore.
He's not muted.
No.
He's not no mute. No.
Yeah. I can click to mute him, and it says mute Gaurav for everyone in the meeting.
And my mobile is not responding.
Only Gaurav will be able to unmute themselves. And he did, but we cannot hear them.
He says he can hear us.
Yeah.
I see you mute and unmute now.
Well, as a organizer of the meeting, I can mute someone. Should I mute Alain just as a test? Alain, is it okay if I mute you?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And then, okay, Alain is now muted, but I think you can unmute yourself and you can talk. Try that now.
No, I think not.
Alain, can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Oh,
okay. Now
okay.
we hear Goro. Speak, Goro.
So config is like, it's a beautiful concept, and we should rely on config a bit.
Sorry.
Yeah, Alain, we can hear you now.
Okay, I find out how.
Yeah, I think it was a bug, Goro. Yeah, so sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I was hearing, and I was feeling like a spirit who can hear everything but tell his feeling. So,
Goro, what do you think? Should we add
say something? So config is good to have. We can rely, because ATK 4.3 it was a very relied already.
Yeah, and I also like the idea that there are some sort of arrays. For example, the add-on could call a API get config, and it passed a parameter of itself as a class, which is consistent always, and it gets back an array which they can use later on for everything else.
Yeah, I really like what showed. It's really cool, something we can think of seriously.
And the implementation is really simple. Here I have really simple definer, a factory that call a callable that probably can be done better. It was something that done in a rush to test the whole thing library. And this is instance. Instance is like this. I mean, it's really simple. And the only one thing that is done is in the get config you can get a factory object or the instance or the element if it's not of these two types. And
so when you're calling underscore get config path and default value, what does it actually do?
Is the standard config trait.
Does it take the value from the file?
No, that is the config trait of ATK that get the lookup config element.
I haven't seen haven't looked into that so much.
Okay. It will get the object. The lookup is it takes the object from the array present in config that it was loaded in the event in the method read config. Read config can take 1, 2, 3, 4 type, but for that implementation we can take only this. Because I can't instantiate object in JSON in JML.
So let's say I want to create an add-on, and I want also the add-on to have some of the default config in JSON, but I want user to be able to override this config using PHP callback or whatever, whatever you have there, if they want to. So and obviously I need to know what's inside the add-on. Can we make something like that as a proof of concept? So let's say you have a login. Okay, let's say login. Authentication, and you specify the username as username and password fields. So when you specify the user model, you specify those. Or actually, forget that. Let's say complexity of the password. So when you change the password, I want to enforce a specific complexity on the passwords. And I want to have the default config inside the YAML file, which is located inside that add-on. That means add-on will have to rely on YAML parser. So it will have dependency for the YAML parser. Also, I want user to be able to define inside the global configuration of the app some different requirements for the password strength.
Okay.
So how can I do all of this without? So it needs to work with the default ATK, right? So.
We can define a read config in the add-on controller or something like this. I think we need more blueprint for this add-on. It's an add-on. We make an add and we have an init method when we added it. In the init, we must do everything.
How about this? So I have this pull request inside the login right now where we're doing some work, and let's add support for config files in there, and also the version 2 of ATK UI will add a get config argument for the application. So let's just create a first usage of this and then see how it goes from there.
So the only thing in this config is we'll be reading some config files from the add-on itself, and user can override that in the global one.
Yes,
I guess
that's
so.
Correct.
I'm getting right. Okay. Sounds great.
Look for config and look for the overriding config in the master config folder. Let's say like this.
Yeah.
Can be.
So it's just about reading the file. It's just about reading the file. And if the key is the same, it gets overridden, and the key can be nested add-on name, and its configuration is in subarray.
Something like this. Wait, just one moment. Something like if it ATK for login is wrong, I know, but
that's good.
add something like this, not with this.
Well, we have out controller there, so
yes. And we have password length.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. 5.
That's right. So each controller override in a global file.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I don't want to calculate it right away, I can wrap it inside a new instance. So some class, which means it's gonna be an object until something tries to read it, and then it becomes a value. Is that right?
Yes.
That's what Francisco was trying to do. Like whenever someone wants to ATK4 login controller, this gets passed as default parameters.
Right. You mean injected?
It looks like an injector then.
Yeah. So the question then, I mean, can you configure any class like this?
If we have the namespace, we can check. We can check if there is the key in the config when we init it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, can you add another one? So let's say ATK4 UI grid, and make sure that it has a class called huge.
Good.
Yeah, let's say grid in here.
Grid.
Yeah, and arrow then, and inside write class equals. Yeah, which is a CSS class. So inside the array, is class.
The default definition of every grid, the default definition of every view.
Yes.
Can be interesting. Even this can be interesting.
Yeah. So we can apply.
This looks like an config itself. It's just in config. So every class should read for its config and default values from the config. User can pass while initiating an object, or it can be read from the config, which to take precedence.
Yeah. Right now all the defaults are inside the class definition when you're defining the class, but this could take override things.
But at the same user can create a class object and pass as a seeder as the second to the default values. If user passes that thing in the config, in the coding, config is also there, which should take precedence then.
Well, let's sleep on this. It's an interesting concept. I think for now, let's just have the configuration file enabled by default, so that add-ons could rely on a function to get their configuration, and then later on we can make injection as well through the factory. But I think that might be so. It probably makes a lot of sense for an add-on, but I'm not sure.
For add-on, I think is a cornerstone, really.
Yeah, but for the default classes like this, it's worth thinking, but I'm not sure.
I think this is not needed. Interesting, but not needed, because for my experience, at now every grid have a different configuration, or doesn't need something specific. Okay, let's say in every table, I want to use the compact class because I like dense data in my table, but it's something like 10 charts more to write. It's not this big change, but for add-ons is really a cornerstone.
Okay.
Okay.
The other idea I just wanted to add, let's say we have a type inside ATK. Maybe the configuration file can be used to extend standard types of the field. But, okay, so maybe something to think about.
No, like you said, let's sleep over it and see what can be done.
Yeah.
It can be global date type. It can be global date type format for persistence in the config.
Not understanding.
Because the previous ATK 4.3 was having it. The JS date format, jQuery date format, and the PHP side date format as an config. You can override it whole application wide.
Yeah, I think that's really good. You know, things like that we can use, like date formatting or locales or whatever. You know, it can all go into the config file. So the fact that there is a support for a config file is amazing.
Okay, that's good.
I have to run, guys. Sorry. Let's finish up the meeting.
Okay.
So I think we talked about everything. Thanks for the demonstration, Francesco, and let's definitely add config trait. Let's have some example first, and then we can decide how much of the config we're gonna use. But obviously, we can use more and more as we need. So we can start with just for add-ons and then extend it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone for your time, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Good night.